Dear viewers, thank you for joining me in the latest episode of Manitowoc History Review. Today we will be discussing Manitowoc's Carnegie Library that once sat at the corner of North 8th Street and Chicago Street. This library would serve the city of Manitowoc for over 60 years and became a part of the everyday life of the citizens of Manitowoc. Before we get into the Carnegie Library itself, a brief history of the Manitowoc library system is in order. So let's begin. The first library was proposed by Mr. K. Jones in 1856. Jones, considered one of the founding fathers of Manitowoc, had come from Chicago in the late 1840s. He was a merchant that dealt in tin sheeting, iron and copper wares, shingles, lath, cedar posts, sail rigging and gill nets, glass, nails, boots and shoes. In other words, almost anything that was needed in the village of Manitowoc at the time. Unfortunately, his idea of a library would have to wait for the end of the American Civil War to become a reality. That first library finally came about in 1868 when Jones donated land and a building at the corner of North 7th Street and York Street. He also donated other property that was sold to finance the library and purchase of books. At that time, the Jones Library Association was created and the state legislature at Madison granted a charter to the association. The library Jones created was actually a private library, and those desiring to use the library had to pay a fee of $4 per year or a life membership of $25. When opened, the library had 1,600 volumes in their inventory. The first librarian was A.H.M. Van Winkle, and the following year a Mr. E. Sharp took over the librarian duties. The position of librarian was not a paid position. Their only compensation was fuel and free rent of an apartment above the library. The library quickly ran into a problem when those borrowing books failed to return them. An inventory shortly after opening showed 43 volumes unaccounted for. Over the following years, the library had its ups and downs. As always, money was short, which led to the building and library not receiving the repairs needed to keep it in the best of condition. At times the library was only open several hours a week. They also had trouble keeping good quality citizens on the library association. Since there was little money, there was not much members of the board could do to keep the library attractive to the citizens of Manitowoc. From around 1891 to 1900 there was no activity at the Jones Library. The books, which were left, remained on the shelves with no one there to check them out. On February 14, 1900, the final meeting of the Board of Directors of the Jones Library Association was held. At that meeting they voted to transfer all remaining books, furniture and equipment of the Jones Library to what would become the Manitowoc Public Library. For several years, civic groups in Manitowoc had been collecting funds for the creation of a public library in the city. By March 1900 enough funds, $4,700, had been collected to open Manitowoc's first real public library. They had in their inventory around 1,900 books and magazines. The new library was located in a room above the city post office in the Torreson Building, North 8th Street and Commercial Street. The first few weeks in the new library found few customers using the facility. It was later found that many citizens of Manitowoc were of the impression that they had to pay a fee to check out books from the new library. When word finally got around that this was a public library and no fee was required, readership increased dramatically. Public schools in the city began bringing entire classes to the library, which allowed students to check out books, and for a time the library actually ran short of books. From the start, the library above the post office in the Torreson Building was way too small for the needs of the city. The library was located in one small room which was mostly taken up by shelves of books. When students filled the room, it was almost impossible to move from one side of the room to the other. The problem was solved by Eva Anderson and the Clio Club, a ladies' literary society. Eva wrote several letters to the Andrew Carnegie Foundation for money to build a new library in the city. Finally, on December 29, 1902, she received the following letter. Mrs. J. S. Anderson, Vice President Library Board, Manitowoc, Wisconsin. Responding to your letters in behalf of Manitowoc. If the city agree by resolution of the council to maintain a free public library at cost of not less than $2,500 per year and provided a suitable site for the building, Mr. Carnegie will be glad to furnish $25,000 to erect a free public library building. The city council agreed to the conditions of the Carnegie Foundation and set about looking for a site on which to construct the new public library. Yet, in 1903 the city almost lost the $25,000 offered by the Carnegie Foundation. For whatever reason the city council forgot to adopt an ordinance, as prescribed by law, that they had formally accepted the Carnegie Foundation offer. When notified by the Carnegie Foundation that the offer might be withdrawn, the city council had to go into special session to adopt the ordinance. A site was found at the corner of North 8th Street and Chicago Street for which the city paid $9,000. An architect firm from Milwaukee, Van Arichwayan and DeJelek were selected to present plans for the new building, as they had already designed a half-dozen libraries funded by the Carnegie Foundation. The first problem they encountered was that the site for the new library was already occupied. It had been purchased from a Mr. John Hammernick, who many years before had built the Hotel Hammernick on the site. The hotel building had been fairly large, and over the years a number of trees had been planted on the site directly next to the hotel. The hotel was not to be demolished but moved to a new location, but the trees had grown large over the years and blocked the building's removal. The library board requested that the trees not be harmed, as they wished to have the new library constructed on the site of the old hotel with the beautiful old trees still in place. The problem was solved when the movers turned the old hotel building sideways, which allowed it to slip past the trees. The old hotel was moved to North 12th and Huron, where it was converted into a grocery store and 2 apartments. Actual work on the building began on August 3, 1903, with the cornerstone laid on September 24. The main speaker for the laying of the cornerstone was Oscar Torreson, who owned the building in which the present library was then located. The Carnegie Foundation did not furnish the $25,000 to the City of Manitowoc all on time. Instead, they made 5 payments of $5,000 to the city as work on the library progressed. Work on the new library progressed through 1903 and into 1904. It was expected that the new library would open its doors in early June 1904, but things do not always go as planned. The opening finally took place on Saturday, August 27, 1904. It took just over a week to move the books, magazines, and other items from the library in the O. Torreson building to the new library. The final cost of the library was $40,000, with $15,000 of that amount paid by the City of Manitowoc. To say the least, the new library was quite a building. The book room was very spacious. The books were accurately classified and properly arranged, with the shelving facilities being the most modern. The decimal system of classification was used when setting up. Separate sections were assigned to the German, Norwegian, Polish, and Bohemian books. In the center of the bookroom was a beautiful lone desk in the form of an octagon. The desk was provided with numerous small compartments and drawers for the convenience of the librarian. Near the lone desk was a convenient bookcase in which the newly purchased books were shown to the patrons of the library prior to the time of their arrangement on the shelves for use. To the right of the bookroom was the reference room. This was a very cozy little room and was furnished with the standard reference books arranged on shelves. This room also contained a fine picture case, shelves for newspaper files, a table and chairs. East of the reference room was a spacious reading room provided with all the requisite facilities, such as tables, chairs, electric light standards, a magazine case containing all the leading magazines, and newspaper files. The room was also provided with a fireplace surmounted by a mantel over which hangs a picture of the Old Shore Lighthouse. In the southwestern part of the building was a little workroom. This room was fitted with every convenience for the repairing and rebinding of books. Just east of this room was the librarian's office, and east of this and in the southeastern part of the building was the children's room. This was provided with a fireplace and mantel similar to that in the reading room. On the shelves of the children's room were found many of the best juvenile books. The walls were decorated with pictures selected for their educational value. The furniture of this room was well suited for use of the children. The floor of each of the rooms were covered with cork carpet, and the building was heated with steam and lighted with electricity. All in all, the library was a place the citizens of Manitowoc could be proud of. In addition to the first floor, the library had a full basement that was mainly used for storage of furniture, books, magazines, and other materials that there was not room for on the first floor. The second floor was designed for meetings. There were several small meeting rooms and one large area. These rooms became the central area for many social organizations in the city, as well as public lectures and even meeting dealing with the government. In 1906, the newly organized Manitowoc County Historical Society held many of its meetings at that location. Also in 1906, the library established traveling libraries in the county. These libraries were maintained at state expense and were located at Reedsville, Mishicot, Eaton, Kiel, Grimps, and Clark's Mills, as well as a branch library on the south side of Manitowoc. Also discussed was the prospect of what we now know as the interlibrary loan system, where upon request, books could be borrowed from other libraries in the state for a short period of time. While the people of Manitowoc loved their new library, things were not going well at the library. In 1905, the City of Manitowoc elected their first socialist mayor, wealthy businessman Henry Stalls. In his early days, Stalls had established the Manitowoc Manufacturing Company, later known as the National Tinsel Company, as well as a number of other businesses. Stalls was a true socialist. Although a capitalist in his business dealings, he looked down on other capitalists. Stalls also had something against the Manitowoc Library. He took this dislike out on two people, Eva Anderson and Lyman Nash, by refusing to reappoint them to the Manitowoc Library Board. Nash was a prominent lawyer and a Democrat who often disagreed with Stalls. The other person, Eva Anderson, was the lady that requested the funds for the library from the Carnegie Foundation. Stalls said of Mrs. Anderson, she appealed to Carnegie for a library fund and had made the city a beggar. That Carnegie was a man that made millions in the manufacture of armor plate for ships and has shot down peaceful citizens. He also felt that Carnegie had made his money by forcing his employees to work long hours for wages that barely kept them and their families alive. On the last point, he was right. Carnegie had in fact treated his employees as second-class citizens, keeping their wages at almost poverty level while working them 6 long days each week. In later years, he tried to ease his conscience by funding libraries for almost any city or village that asked. Other problems with the library also came to light in 1906. Miss L. E. Stearns of the Wisconsin Library Commission came to Manitowoc upon the request of the library employees. After investigating, she found that the library staff were expected to work long hours and were underpaid for the work they were expected to do. She also found that the $2,700 appropriated by the city for library expenses did not come close to meeting the needs of the library. That many of the shelves in the library were empty, especially in the children's room. The situation was not corrected until 1907, when Mayor Stalls was defeated in the 1907 election. The new library became a mainstay for the citizens of Manitowoc and would remain pretty much unchanged through the 1920s and into the Great Depression. With little money to spend on entertainment, the library found many new faces applying for library cards or just stopping by to read newspapers, magazines, and other material. The next major change came during World War II, when the population of Manitowoc increased almost daily. People moved to Manitowoc for defense jobs, bring their families along. This increased the daily use of the library, which strained to meet their needs. In 1950, an open house was held at the library to commemorate the 50th anniversary of the Manitowoc Library System. At the time, it was noted that the current library building was far too small to meet the needs of the community. This was known by the Manitowoc Library Board, but things have never moved swiftly in Manitowoc. When asked about a new library, their standard answer was, "The situation is under study." Finally, in 1964, they could wait no longer. The library board applied for and received a federal building grant, and the city agreed to pay the balance for a new library. A location for the new library was studied, and after a number of sites were offered, a lot at the intersection of South 9th and Hamilton Streets, the old Roosevelt Playground, was selected. Contracts for the new library amounting to $467,334 were signed, and groundbreaking took place on November 22, 1965. It would take another 14 months, but on January 14, 1967, the new library on Hamilton Street opened its doors. The problem now was what to do with the old public library on North 8th Street. The building itself was 63 years old but still very sound in structure. The city could have used it for government offices or for other purposes. The question why it was not has never been answered. The building itself sat empty for the next 6 years. Then in June 1972, the First National Bank in Manitowoc, now Bank First, offered to buy the Carnegie Library building and the North Side Fire Station, which sat directly next to the library. First National Bank offered $45,000 for the two properties, and the Manitowoc City Council agreed to the sale. Strangely, no one in Manitowoc, and I mean no one, objected to the two historic building being taken down for the construction of a proposed new bank. This has been typical for the City of Manitowoc for the past 100 years, to completely demolish its historic building for newer building or just to create vacant lots, which does not say a great deal for the city. As the Carnegie Library building was being taken down, a box which was sealed in lead was found. When opened, it contained newspapers published in 1903, vintage coins, an historical sketch of the library, a history of the city prior to 1854, city directory, and other documents. These items were turned over to the city. The First National Bank now sits on the property where the Carnegie Library once sat, and today few people in Manitowoc remember or can tell you its past location. I want to thank you for joining me in this latest edition of Manitowoc History Review. Stay tuned for future videos. Stay safe.